Hey everyone, I'm going to show you how to do the screen replacement project. So let's go ahead and import our footage. We can just drag our footage file into the project window here. You can also double click in the project window to search for and find your footage to import it. Once your footage is imported, select it and drag it onto the new composition button, which is right down here. And that'll create a new composition based on the settings of your footage. So if we hit 0 on the number pad, we can play through this. And you'll see that there's actually two different shots in this one piece of footage. So we want to crop off the second half. So let's find that frame where it changes to the second shot. That's right here. And I'm going to drag my work area, that's this blue bar right here, the gray bar with the blue tab on the end. And I'll drag that all the way to the last frame that I want. And so to remove the second half of this, let's right click on our work area and click Trim Comp to Work Area. And now that's shortened the length of our composition just to be the work area that we had selected. So now we're just working with the first shot. So now that we have our shot, let's go over to the Effect Controls panel right next to Project, and if you're not seeing that, it's available under Window, Effect Controls. And we want to drop our Mocha effect onto this to track our screen. So in your Effects and Presets panel, and if you're not seeing that, that's available under Window, Effects and Presets. So that's right here, and you can search for the Mocha effect and just drag it on to your footage layer. So now the Mocha effect has been applied to your footage. So let's go ahead and open up Mocha, clicking on the Mocha logo here. And so again, we just have the first half of our footage loaded into Mocha. So we want to track this screen here, but there are a couple issues that will not let our track be perfect, and mainly it's this thumb here. This is moving very separately from the screen that we want to track. And also there's this reflection of her head, and there's a couple other background reflections at the beginning here. So even though we want our screen to end up within this blue area here, we actually don't want to track anything in this blue area because all of the reflections are moving around differently than our screen. What is moving accurately with the screen are the edges of the phone. So that's all we want to track. So I'm going to go ahead and use my spline tool here to just trace around the case of the phone. Now this is what we want to be tracking. And just click on the first point again to close your mask loop. And you'll see I am including the thumb here, and that's okay because we can subtract that by using another layer. So I'm going to take my spline tool again and just trace very loosely the thumb. And let's go ahead and name our layers so it's easy to follow. I'll double click on layer 2 and name it thumb. And layer 1, I'll name screen. And if I turn on this right here, show layer mats, we can see this white highlighted area is what we'll be tracking. So right now we're tracking not only the case, but also the blue screen inside, but we're excluding the thumb area that we've drawn. And that's because the thumb layer is on top of our screen layer. So if we were to track forward right now, it would be looking at everything in this white area, but we don't want it to look at the blue screen because that's where extra reflections are going to be. So instead of creating a separate layer to subtract it with, we can actually add another mask to our screen layer. So if you press and hold on the spline tool, and we go to our Add Points tool, this will create another mask without creating another layer. So I'm going to go ahead and draw on the inside of the screen here, and you'll see I'm including just the blue edges because this is now what we're going to be tracking. The case, the edge of the phone, and a little bit of the blue edge here. The majority of the reflections are in the center here, and so that's what we want to exclude. So if this is all we're giving Mocha, we should end up with a pretty good track. So we're about ready to track now, but let me just scroll through to make sure. And so I'm seeing, since the thumb moves, our thumb mask doesn't follow the thumb. So see, now the thumb has entered our white tracking area here, and we don't want that. So I can go ahead and on this frame, select your thumb layer and reposition your mask. And that's going to create a keyframe. You can see the green keyframe right here, and here's the original one that we placed. And so it's going to reposition this mask between the two frames, animating it. And you can see it's not perfectly following it, so I'm going to add another keyframe right here. And that's looking pretty good. I'm just going to keep adjusting this throughout the timeline to make sure the thumb is fully covered the whole time. Okay, that thumb is looking pretty good. So I think we're ready to track our screen, and you can see the screen is not perfectly aligned. That's because we want to be on the frame that we drew our mask on, and that's this green keyframe right here. So we're ready to track, but one last thing is this thumb layer is going to be tracked as well if we hit track, which we don't want. We only want this to be an animated mask subtracting from our track area. So to disable tracking on the thumb layer, you can click this gear icon right here. So now we're only tracking the screen. So with the screen layer selected and the thumb tracking disabled, we can now track forward. And if your track isn't following along nicely, you can reposition your masks to make sure you're only tracking the areas that you want. I got a pretty clean track on my first try here, but you'll see since I started on the third frame here, I didn't get to track these first two frames, so I'm going to go ahead and track backwards, one frame at a time, and now we have our screen tracked throughout. So once you're happy with your track, you're going to set your screen size. So go ahead and enable your planar surface, clicking this blue box right here. And I'm going to turn off these masks because I don't need to look at them anymore. And so I'll click this button here, show layer outlines, and that'll hide those. And I'll also turn off my white layer matte. So now I'm just looking at this blue box here. It's a little hard to see because of the blue screen, but it's there. And so you'll see it's not covering the full area of the screen. So I want to drag these corners up, and it's okay if it's not perfect. And I like to err on the side of going over rather than too short of the screen. So I'm including a little bit of the black edges here. But as long as you're covering the full area, you're good. So I'll just play through this to make sure my screen is tracked nicely. And I'm pretty happy with that. So I can now go ahead and save with this top left button here, and we can close out of Mocha. So now our track data is in the Mocha effect, but we need to bring it into After Effects. So let's open up this Tracking Data tab here, and we'll click Create Track Data. And we want to create the track data for our screen layer, not the thumb layer. So I'll hit OK, and you can see it's created all these keyframes here, and that's all the animation data for our track. So now we want to apply this animation data to our screen. So we'll make our screen by just making a solid. You can go Layer, New, Solid, or you can click Control Y. And you want to make sure it's the same resolution as your composition. And if it's not, just go ahead and hit Make Comp Size, and our composition is 3200 by 1800. So I'll hit OK, and now it's created a gray solid that has the same resolution as our composition. And I can turn off this new layer here that it's made, and I can see the footage layer underneath. So I have two layers stacked on top of each other. And so I'm turning on and off the visibility of this one. So when I have my solid layer selected, you'll see we're not seeing Mocha here because the Mocha effect is only on the footage layer. So with my footage layer selected, now we can see our Mocha effect. So now we can apply this animation data to our solid. So let's select Layer to Export to. Let's select our solid, and we'll hit Apply. And let me turn the visibility back on. And now we can see that we've applied a corner pin effect to our solid layer. So with our solid layer selected, we can now see there's a corner pin effect. And the corner pin effect repositions the corners of our solid, and it's animated to match the blue box that we made in Mocha. So that's looking really nice. And so now we want to fill in our screen here with our actual content. So what we need to do is pre-comp our solid layer, because we just want to work inside of this screen before we apply all the track data. So we'll go Control-Shift-C, or you can right-click your layer and hit Pre-Compose. And I'm just going to name this Screen. I'm going to name this Screen Track because this is what our track data has been applied to. And you also want to make sure Leave All Attributes is selected. That'll leave this corner pin effect onto our pre-comp rather than sending it inside our pre-comp. So now we can double click on our screen track layer, and it should open a new composition here. And now once again, we're just seeing our gray solid without any effects applied before the corner pin has been applied. So we can go back to our original composition and see our screen here. Once again, double click here to get into your screen track. So if I put anything here, anything I put in here, let's say I put another solid that's 100 by 100 pixels. This is just for reference. Let me change the color so we can just see it. So, and we go back to our main composition, we can now see that is appearing on the phone, but it's stretched. And that's because our corner pin is bringing the edges of our horizontal frame way into a vertical frame here. So we don't want our screen to be stretched like this. We want our graphics to display accurately. So we need to create another layer that's the correct size of the phone screen. So I'm going to go back to my project panel here, and I'm going to create a new composition. And this composition is going to be 2160 by 3840. And that's about the size of an iPhone screen. So I'll hit OK. So now we've got a new composition that's a vertical frame. And this is where we'll put all of our graphics. So I've just gotten a generic iPhone home screen. I'll drag that in to my project panel. And now I'll drag this image into my composition. And you can put anything you want in here. So my image that I brought in is a little small, so I'll hit S to scale. And I'll scale that up so it fills the entire screen size. it looks like we want our composition to be a little taller to fit this screen that I'm working with. So I'm just going to adjust the resolution of our composition. Under Composition Settings, you can hit Control K. And I'm just going to drag this in a little bit, and you can see it's updating live. And once I hit the edges of my screen here, that's looking good. Hit OK. So now we have our screen image that we want to bring into our screen track composition. So let me just name this composition screen, and I just hit enter to rename. So I'll go into my screen track composition, and this is where our gray solid is. This is where we want to bring our screen graphic in. So select your screen layer you just made and drag that in. And so you'll see this is now in there, but it's too big, it's not stretched right, and if we go back now to our main comp, you'll see it's still stretched improperly. So what we need to do is, in our screen track layer, we need to stretch this. Even though it's a vertical image, we need to stretch it to match the resolution of our comp, because it then gets re-stretched with the corner pin. So all we need to do is hit Control-Alt-F or right-click, transform, and fit to comp. So what that does is it scales your layer to match the resolution of your composition. So now that we've done that, if we go back into our main layer, it looks correct. So now we have our screen properly stretched and properly tracked. So now we're ready to move on